Hello everyone. So in this video, I will be discussing audit of revenue and receivables. So let's begin by refreshing our knowledge on the revenue cycle because as auditors, we are expected to know what are the documents involved when we sell our product or service, and then later on record them as part of our receivables if the sale was made on credit, or record it as a cash transaction when we receive a payment from a specific customer. So we have to review the revenue cycle to um, help us remember which departments are involved in recording sales transactions, and who are the persons responsible for the performance of a specific task related to the recording of revenues. Okay, so let's begin. So this is the revenue cycle subsystem in a nutshell. So we begin, so you can see here numbers. So we begin with the sales order. Of course, the revenue cycle is triggered by the receipt, by our receiving of an order from a specific client or customer. So the first one will be sales order. And then we proceed to the second stage, which is credit or customer service, especially if a specific customer is allowed to buy something from us on credit. So we usually have to check whether that client or that customer has a specific credit limit. And if we are to grant this new sales to such specific client or customer, will it not exceed that person's current credit limit? And then if the sales is authorized, we proceed to the shipment of the goods or products. So that's number three, shipping. And then fourth and fifth is for the billing to happen. So we record it as an accounts receivable from the client. And then later on, we collect the receivable from the client. So the last part of the revenue cycle will be the cash receipts or collections stage. Okay, let me check the file. Okay. All right. So this is the manual sales order processing system, and I think it would be best for us to look at the manual sales order processing system instead of the computerized, because um, if we start with computerized sales order processing system, there are functions that are merged in an electronic or automated processing system. So there might be some um, tasks or like authorizations that are already merged in one same person, or there are also times that a specific function is not anymore performed by a human being, but by it is already performed by a computer. So it would be best if we familiarize ourselves with the manual sales order processing system. So look at here. So we have here it's like a flow chart of the transactions. So we begin with the customer placing his or her order. So we have the customer, and then remember this symbol. This represents a document. So the customer sends us a customer order, and then we prepare the sales order. So here we have the following documents. So as auditors, we have to know what documents are involved in order for us also to have a clear understanding of what documents are we going to ask from the audit client. and then what is the relationship between this document to the other document. So let's familiarize ourselves with these documents. So we have the customer copy of the sales order. So we have here several copies of the sales order. So one copy will serve as a customer copy. So we will send this to the customer later on. And then we have also one copy of sales order for stock release so that the warehouse will know that it has to get items inside the warehouse and then ship it to the client or the customer. We also have one file copy, so we will retain this because this is the file copy of the company. And then we have the packing slip, shipping notice, and another file copy. We have the invoice, the ledger copy, and another file copy. So you can see here three separate file copies, which we will trace later on kung asa sila padong. And then we also have here a credit copy. This is particularly, as I have mentioned a while ago, if ang isa ka customer or isa ka client kay authorized to buy something from us on credit. So we have to check whether napabay balance ihang credit limit or wala na. So we have to perform here a credit check, and then if okay pa within pa sa ihang credit limit, then the credit copy will be approved by the credit department. So if you notice here, the sales department is not authorized to approve credit. Okay, so this is one segregation of duties nga aspect. So the approval of the credit sales will not come from the sales department, but will come from the credit department. Okay. So the approved credit copy here will be uh, placed on our file. And then this will be kept, these following documents will be kept pending credit approval. So, okay, so mag-standby pa ni sila. And then once we receive a go signal from the credit department, then we will proceed to the next functions here. Okay, so this one is the customer order. Remember here, we receive a customer order from the customer, so we have to file it as part of our documentation or part of our source documents. Okay, so this is the customer open order file. When we speak of customer open order file, that means this particular order is still open, which means nga wala pa na fulfill ang kanang order. Okay, so here comes billing. So remember here, we have here the documents prepared by the sales department. So this will then be forwarded to the billing. So which of these documents man will be forwarded to the billing department? The following will be forwarded: the invoice, the ledger copy, and the other file copy. So diba, remember here we have three file copies. One will form part of our copy there is a sales department. One will be forwarded to billing. Okay, so the billing department will have to check these three documents, and then it has to reconcile the amounts listed in the invoice, in the ledger copy, and the file copy. So dapat magmatch na sila tanan, magmatch tanan. So add prices and bill customer. And then the file copy here will then be stored in the files within the billing department. Okay, and then since if na-reconcile ni ang kaning tulo ka buok na documents, then the billing department will have to record such transaction in the sales journal. Okay, then we have to produce a journal voucher for this, and then the journal voucher will serve as a guide. Not as a guide. The journal voucher will be used to post the transaction in the general ledger, diba? So mag-una man gyud ang journal padong dito sa general ledger. Okay. here. And then, since everything is okay naman, manahuman naman siya reconcile sa billing, then the billing will forward the stock release copy to inventory control. To the inventory control department. Yeah. And then the invoice will then be sent to the customer, and then the ledger copy will then be sent to the accounts receivable department. Okay. Then we proceed to the warehouse. So remember here, another file copy, the third file copy will be sent to the warehouse together with the stock release. So here the inventory control actually pertains to the warehouse department. So the warehouse department will receive the stock release from the billing department as well as the file copy of the sales order from the sales department. Okay. Then, upon receipt of such documents, the warehouse will then pick the goods as described there, di ba, sa stock release nga document. So, ingon dito nga, please release this number, let's say, 10 kabuok of this particular inventory. So, the warehouse department will have to follow the instructions found in our stock release. And then, after which, the warehouse department will have to update the stock records para ma-record na ang decrease sa inventory nato. Okay, so this is granting we are using the perpetual inventory system. Okay. And then this file copy that the warehouse department has received will then be stored sa files within the warehouse department. Okay. And then the stock release document, this one, will then be sent to shipping. So the shipping department will receive the stock release document as well as these three documents from the sales department. So the shipping is the tracking slip and the file copy. So what the shipping department would do is to reconcile these three documents that came from the sales department and the stock release that was sent to it by the warehouse. So dapat nagmatch pud ang mga kuan dira, mga items. So for example, ingon si sales nga, oy, ang gi-order ni customer is 10 kabuok nga bags. So dapat ang diri sa stock release nga gikan ni warehouse naka-indicate sad nga 10 ra sad kabuok na bags para to make sure that whatever is released is not more than what is ordered. Kay basin na ay kanang ilad-ilad din ba. So dapat kung pila ra ang gi-order, maorasad ang gi-padala or gi-release from the warehouse department. So the shipping department has the task to reconcile these documents that I have mentioned. Okay, and then if everything is okay na, the shipping department will record the transaction in its shipping log. Okay, and then pag ship na so gipadala na ni shipping department, so ang packaging, so na packaging dira, let's say gisod siya og box. So it will include the bill of lading and the packing slip will then be sent to the carrier. So if the company is using a third party carrier, for example, ang customer is taga lahi nga lugar, so kailangan pa siya moagi og dagat. So the carrier here will be the shipping company, not the shipping department. Ang shipping department is within the company itself. So the shipping company, so moadto sila sa pier, mo contact sila og dito sa barko, nga ilang ipadala dito ang gi-order sa customer. So that would be the carrier. So it should include the packing slip and the bill of lading. So take note of the documents that are involved in the sales order processing system. Okay. So then, what happens now? So still within the company, here, we have to update our inventory. So, balik-balik rin siya nga mga documents, gipasa-pasa lang from one department to another. So, gi-update na ang ato ang inventory sa ledger. And then, for accounts receivable department, it will now record the accounts receivable for that specific client. So, what the accounts receivable department would do is to update the AR record. So, we have here the AR subsidiary ledger. So, Because when we look at the AR or accounts receivable records, total or aggregate naman ang naa dinha. So, para makahibalo ka, pila ang accounts receivable for a specific client. So, for example, ang sa AR, makakita ka there 10 million nga accounts receivable. If you want to know the breakdown, kinsa man ang nakautang aning 10 million. So, you have to look at the AR subsidiary ledger because the subsidiary ledger will give us the information of who are these clients or who are the customers that still owe us something. So, na dito customer A, mao ni iyaha, customer B, mao ni iyaha. And then the total of which should be equal to the AR records. Okay? And then we have here the general ledger department, which is tasked to post this transaction to the general ledger. Okay, so that's it for the sales order processing system. Now, let's proceed to the sales return. So, should the customer receive a wrong product or correct unta siya nga product pero defective siya or na-damage, so the customer will then return the goods to us. So what will happen inside the company itself? So we'll start with the receiving department. So the customer will prepare a return slip. Okay, and then the return slip will be sent to the warehouse. And then the return slip will be sent to sales department. The sales department will be the one to prepare a credit memo. So, unsa kan ining credit memo, this will inform the other departments that the return is authorized and the customer is entitled for a reduction sa iyahang payable padong diri nato. So, of course, the receiving department will have to check first whether the goods are received in good condition. So, for example, giuli na siya nato because sayop ang ato ang nahatag nila. So, the goods that are returned to us should be also in good condition. So, say, receiving department, i-check na niya dira. And then, if okay, good condition, so ibalik niya dito sa warehouse. The sales department will have then to will have to authorize the crediting of the accounts receivable specific to that client. So, mao na siyang gitawag siya nga credit memo because ipa-credit ang accounts receivable. So, what does it mean if ipa-credit ang accounts receivable? We all know in our basic accounting that the normal balance of accounts receivable is debit. So if we are to credit accounts receivable, that means we have to decrease accounts receivable. So mo na siyang gitawag na credit memo. So the credit memo will then be forwarded to billing. The billing department will update the journal and the sales returns and allowances nga records. So this transaction will increase the balance found sa ato ang sales returns and allowances nga account. And then the credit memo will then be forwarded to inventory control so that the inventory department will have to increase the balance of the inventory. Kay ingon man dito nga nauli naman, so dapat i-increase balik ang balance sa ato ang inventory. So si inventory control will have to update the inventory sub ledger and then forward the copy of the credit memo to the accounts receivable department. The accounts receivable department will have to update the AR subledger, which means that pangitaon jud to ang pangan didto sa customer nga nag-return para i-credit ang iyang accounts receivable. So pagamyan ang iyang accounts receivable. Okay, and then the credit memo will then be stored sa files ni accounts receivable department. And then this particular journal voucher will then be forwarded to the general ledger department so that that transaction, that journal entry made by the billing department will be posted sa general ledger. Okay, so that's for sales return. So, masabtan ra siya, no, ang process. Cash receipt system, okay, this time, let's say, walay problema, nahatag jud ang correct nga goods sa customer, and then later on, after pila ka days, nibayad na si customer nato. So, we now have the cash receipts system. So, here we start with customer giving us the check or cash nga ibayad niya together with the remittance advice. Now, what is this remittance advice? Nganong importante man siya? This is particularly important if the customer has several outstanding nga bayronon sa atoa. So for example, si customer A na siya 5 kabuok invoices nga bayronon sa atoa. So invoice 1, invoice 2, invoice 3, 4, and 5. And what if ang iyahang bayran is ang invoice 1 o invoice number 2? So ang iyang cheque nga ihatag nato is total na, di ba? Total na sa balances sa invoice number 1 and invoice number 2. Now, if we are to receive that check without corresponding remittance advice, magtag-antag no nga asa man day ani ang iyang gibayaran, asa ani nga invoices, 5 gud kabuk na invoices. So asa ani nga invoices ang iyang gibayaran ani nga cheque. So magtag-antag-anta. So para dili na ta magtag-antagan, mao na ni ato ang guide, si remittance advice. So the remittance advice will list which particular invoices are being paid using this cheque. Okay. So the mailroom will then have to reconcile the amount shown in the check vis-a-vis the total amount of the invoices that are listed in the remittance advice. Okay, and then these documents will be forwarded to the cash receipts department. So the cash receipts department will have to update the cash receipts journal. So kay nakadawat man ta og cash, the cash receipts journal will have to be updated. So mo increase, there should be a corresponding increase in the cash receipts journal. And then prepare the deposit slip para i-deposit na siya nga amount didto sa ato ang bangko. Now, as auditors, sa perspective ni auditor, ang ato ang i-check, no? So if naay mga cheque dira nga gikan sa mga customers, para ma-sure na to, ma-check na to whether that particular check or those checks nga gihatag sa customer kay gi-deposit jud sa bangko sa under sa account sa company, kailangan na to pangitaon kung naabay deposit slip to evidence that this particular check was indeed deposited in the company's bank accounts. Anya wala siya gikawat. Okay. Like in my case, I have I am handling a case right now involving qualified theft. So naay company unya naay tig-kolekta og kanang bayad from the customers, and then wala niya gi-deposit ang iyang gi-collect, wala niya gi-deposit sa bank account ni company, but rather gi-deposit niya sa bank account sa iyang asawa. Okay, so mo nag-file siya og qualified theft. So as auditors, kita pohon as auditors, we have to check whether naabay deposit slip covering the deposit of the check that we received from the client. Okay, and then padong nata ni accounts receivable. So if ikaw na as accounts receivable department, what you should do is you have to update the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger for that particular customer nga nibayad. So kay nibayad naman siya, dapat na ay corresponding deduction from his or her account under our subsidiary ledger. And then the general ledger will have to post the transaction. General ledger department will have to post that transaction sa general ledger sa company. Okay. And then the controller here will have to receive the remittance list from the mailroom, and as well as the journal voucher coming from the general ledger department and the account summary. So as the controller, you have to check and reconcile these 4 documents, no? So i-reconcile niya kung unsa nga amount ang naa sa deposit slip, parehas basad nga amount nga naa dito sa remittance list. Ang kaning remittance list, this is a derivative from the remittance advice. And then the journal voucher, how much was posted there in our journal, dapat parehas na sila nga amount. So mo na ang role ni controller. So let's summarize the internal control internal control so far that we have looked at sa ato ang process kanina. So the control activities are the following. So we have transaction authorization. So for sales processing, um, transaction authorization meaning there must be an authorization when it comes to uh, sales on credit. So for sales on credit, there should be a corresponding credit check. And then for returns as well, so dapat authorized ang return. So within sa ato ang policy, so for example, we allow returns from the clients as long as mga mga conditions. So dapat authorized pod ang pag-return. So we have to look at the return policy. Okay, and then for segregation of duties under sales processing, credit must be separate from processing, as we have seen a while ago. Inventory control must be separate from the warehouse. The accounts receivable subsidiary ledger is separate from the general ledger. Okay, then for the accounting records, these are the accounting records involved. We have the sales orders, sales journals, accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, accounts receivable control, or the general ledger, which shows us the total accounts receivable, and then inventory subsidiary ledger, inventory control, and the sales account under our general ledger. And then for the access control, the physical access to inventory must be restricted. So dapat dili ra bisag kinsa ang pwede makasud sa warehouse. Kaya kung bisag kinsa ra ang pwede musud sa warehouse, there is a risk nga makawatan dira sa warehouse. So only authorized persons should have physical access to our inventory which are stored in the warehouse. And then also access to accounting records above. So for example, if you are from the sales department, you should not have access to the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. So your access should be limited to function within the department. So that's also under access controls. And then we have independent verification. So we have to verify whether the amounts reflected in the shipping document and the other documents involved are the same. And then for cash receipts, transaction authorization, we have the remittance list or the cash pay list. Again, this is coming from the mailroom, and this is merely a derivative of the remittance advice given by the customer or client. And then for segregation of duties under the cash receipts function or process rather, so cash receipts must be separate from accounts receivable and the cash account, which is under the cash receipts department. So, ang magdawat sa kwarta ug ang mag-record sa or mag-update sa record must be two separate persons. Kaya nga naman, kung ikaw mismo na ay authority to receive cash, yan na pod kay authority to update the cash account. This is a very risky, this will give you actually an opportunity to commit fraud. No? Kay, kung magdawat ka, ikaw rin masad ang maka-record. So, bahala kung wala ni mo gi-deposit, i-record na lang ni mo dito na na-deposit ko nung siya. So, na risky kayo siya. So that's why we have to segregate these functions. And then the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger must be separate from the general ledger. Okay, supervision must be maintained, especially in the mailroom. Kasi mailroom manggod ang magdawat jud og una sa kanang mga remittance advice o sa cheque or the cash nga ihatag sa ato ang customers. So there must be strict supervision within the mailroom. And then the accounting records involved under cash receipts nga process are the following. So we have the remittance advices, the checks that we received from our customers or clients, and then the remittance list, the cash receipts journal, the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, the AR control account, and the cash account. And then for access control, physical access to cash must also be restricted to authorized persons only. And then same with the sales processing department, access to accounting records above should also be restricted to those persons that are whose main task is to update such accounting records. So if dili ka within that particular department, you should not have access to that department's accounting records. And then independent verification. So we have to verify whether nagtugma ba tanan ato ang mga documents. Okay, so you have to remember as auditors, so let's shift into the auditing perspective. So as auditors, we have to check, especially when we do our test of controls, we have to know and check whether the following functions are really segregated or spread out into different persons. So we have three, as in general, when we speak of segregation of functions, we have three rules. So first, transaction authorization should be separate from transaction processing. Asset custody should be separate from asset record keeping. And then the organization should be so structured that the perpetration of a fraud requires collusion between two or more individuals. So dapat lisod kayo pag-perpetrate of fraud. Unya kung ganahan jud sila magbuhat og fraudulent transactions, kailangan sila mag-collude with each other. So dapat na ay lisod man na siya buhaton, di ba? Kay for example, if ikaw na kay fraudulent intent, unya kailangan pa ka convince og someone else from the other department to also concede with your plan. So lisod-lisod siya. Okay, so now that we have been refreshed with the procedure of sales orders, sales returns, and cash receipts transactions, let's now proceed to the auditing perspective, purely auditing perspective. So this time, let's be auditors. Okay, so as auditors, di ba, we have to perform first test of controls and then substantive tests. So let me share with you. Okay, this one. Okay, so we start with test of controls, of course, test of controls of sales and cash receipts. So same sa ato ang i-discuss ganina sa ato ang process, di ba? We have the sales order processing and the cash receipt processing. So for test of controls of sales, we have to look at the following assertions. So if you notice, when we speak of assertions, balik-balik rin na silang assertions, no? 5 kabuok. Existence or occurrence, completeness, rights and obligations, valuation or allocation, presentation and disclosure. So kanang 5 ka-assertions, mahug na sila na constant. But ang specific description of that particular assertion will change depending on the subject matter that we are auditing. So kani kay sales man ang atong gi-audit. So let's look at the first assertion, existence or occurrence. So ato ang i-check whether recorded sales are really for shipments actually made to customers. So whether tinuod gyud naa dito sa sales nga nakabaligya ta og 10 ka book bags ni Mr. A, dapat tinuod gyud to sila. There should the sales transactions should have really existed. So the recorded sales are for shipments actually made to customers. Second assertion, completeness. So all sales transactions that occurred are recorded. So we also have to look into sales cut-off. So for example, if the sale was made close to the end of the accounting period, let's say pag December 30, pag December 31, ni order si customer and then na-ship siya pag January 1, so dapat sakto ang pag-record. Asa man siya i-record, diri ba siya sa December nga cut-off period or sa January na siya i-record as sales. So you also have to remember your FOB shipping point, FOB destination, because this would actually help us determine whether the sale will be recorded in the next period or karon na nga period, kaning cut-off period. So that's for completeness. Then rights and obligations, sales recorded represent only sales transactions because we have the right to collect, diba? We have the right to collect money owed to us from our customers or clients. So kaning mga sales na na-record diri, dapat tinuod sad sila nga sales transactions for us to have that right to collect. Then we have valuation or allocation. Sales are correctly billed and recorded. So more on the mathematical aspect na siya sa sales. And then presentation and disclosure. Sales and accounts receivable are recorded to result in presentation and disclosure in accordance with our PAS and PFRS. Okay, so you have to check as auditor. No, we have to check whether the accounts receivable is presented correctly in the financial statement. So if you remember your financial accounting subjects, you've learned that the accounts receivable should be presented in the balance sheet at net realizable value, right? So NRV. So that means when we speak of NRV, that means that the balance of the allowance for doubtful accounts is already deducted from the gross amount of the accounts receivable. And then if, for example, if naatay gi-pledge nga accounts receivable or gihimo nga collateral nga accounts receivable, such fact should also be presented in the notes to financial statements as part of the disclosure related to the accounts receivable. Okay, so that is for our test of controls. Now, for substantive tests, we still look at the following assertions. No? So we have the following objectives. So same actually. So for occurrence and validity and connected with rights and obligations, our audit objective is to determine that recorded sales are authorized and are for shipments actually made to non-fictitious customers. So how do we attain this objective? How can we able to determine this part? So here are the following procedures that we need to perform. We have to review the sales journal, the general ledger, and the accounts receivable master file or trial balance for large or very unusual items. Because kaning mga unusual items, red flags na siya, no? So kailangan na siya o tagaan na tog attention, and we have to investigate nganong naamay ani nga unusual items. So for example, we can notice nga kani si Mr. A usually mo order gini siya in ani ra na quantity, but there was one transaction large quantity ang iyahang i-order based records sa atong audit client. Di ba kami ilad? Sakto ba kaha ni? So ato na siyang i-check. Then we have to trace sales journal entries to copies of sales orders, sales invoices, and shipping documents. Remember sa ato ang flowchart kanina, di ba? So, i-post na to sa ato ang sales journal, dapat sakto nga amount based sa ato ang sales orders, sales invoices, and shipping documents. Trace shipping documents to entry of shipments to perpetual inventory records. Okay, and then compare prices on sales invoices with authorized price lists or properly executed contracts. So for example, if the published or authorized price list of this particular product is at 100 pesos per product, ato pong i-check na dito sa sales invoice, dili siya overcharge. O nga, sakto jud nga price per item ang nakabutang dito sa ato ang sales invoices. For the completeness assertion, to determine that existing transactions are recorded on a timely basis. So what we should do as auditors is to trace shipping documents to resultant sales invoices and entry into sales journal and accounts receivable master file. So for example, naata diri shipping document, nagtanaw kag shipping document na uy, naay gi-ship dito na 10 items to Mr. A. Tanawa ang sales journal kung na-record ba ni siya dito. Okay? Because we are looking at the completeness assertion. So, dapat ma-check ni mo nga ang tanan gi-ship na record dito sa ato ang journal. Then, for valuation or allocation, part of our audit procedures is to recompute the information on sales invoice. So, not rely entirely on the clients, ato ang audit clients, computation of the sales invoice. So, atong i-recompute. So, quantity times price, quantity times price, quantity times price, and then add everything. Then trace entries in sales journals to sales invoices. So, na dito sa sales journal, na record 100,000 nga sales. Tanawa ang sales invoice kung 100,000 bagyo tinudanay. Trace details in sales invoices to shipping documents, price tests, and customer orders. And then for presentation, part of our audit procedure is to examine documents supporting sales transactions for proper classification. Okay, because you also learned, diba, in your law on sales, there are several mga sales related na mga sabot-sabot, like for example, sale on trial, sale on approval. So dapat kabalusad ka when to recognize this transaction as a sale, and then if naa siya extraordinary nga characteristic, that characteristic must be presented, disclosed in our notes to financial statements. Okay, for cash receipts, we have the following assertions. So we have existence or current, same lagi siya. Existence or occurrence, completeness, rights and obligations, valuation or allocation, presentation, and disclosure. So for existence, the recorded receipts must represent actual collections of cash from customers. Kay basin dito nagibutang-butangan ra. Na for example, migo de mo sa tig update sa records dito sa imong giutangan nga company. So imo ubay palihaw ra gud kog record dito nga nakabayad na kog 100,000 when in fact wala pa. So ato po nang i-check as auditors the recorded receipts there in our cash receipts journal must represent actual collections. There must be an actual collection of cash from the customer. Completeness, so all receipts that are processed must be recorded. So rights and obligations. So kung kabantay mo, guys, existence or occurrence gani, magikan ta sa records. So magsugod ka sa record padung sa source. So for example, the recorded receipts must represent actual collection. So magsugod ka sa cash receipts journal. So record no sa cash receipts journal, i-trace nimo sa source niya whether naa ba jud ang kana nga transaction. So pabaliktad, backwards siya. Mag-una ka sa ending padung sa sugod. Mo na siya for existence or occurrence. For completeness, magsugod ka sa sinugdanan jud den imo siyang i-follow through dito sa ending. So very completeness, all receipts processed and recorded. So magsugod ka sa mail room, 'di ba dito? If you can recall what I've presented a while ago. So magsugod ka sa mail room, imong i-trace padung dito sa records. So source to records, mao na ang completeness. Existence, records to source. Baliktad. Okay? Then we have rights and obligations. All cash receipts are deposited intact in the account of the client. Client here meaning our audit client. So tanan kwarta nga nadawat kay kang company man na. So the company has the right to enjoy the cash received, no? So dapat didut sa na deposit sa account sa ato ang audit client. Wala na siya gikawat sa iyang mga employees. And then valuation or allocation, debits to cash and credits to accounts receivable are valued at amounts received. Presentation and disclosure. Cash receipts transactions are recorded to result in presentation and disclosure in accordance with PAS and PFRS. Let's look at our substantive tests. Okay, for existence or occurrence, our audit procedure for this is for a sample of entries in cash receipts journal, we have to trace them to the pre-listing of cash receipts and to remittance advice. So at this point, dapat na ano mo'y ma-imagine, ha? So, kaning audit procedures, murang ko siya abstract lang kung basahon nimo. So, motong nag-present ko ganina og flowchart para ma-imagine niyo ba? Ma-imagine ninyo, matagaan ninyo life ang audit procedures nga gilista dere. So, from a sample of entries in the cash receipts journal. So, imagine na ganina sa flowchart, So, gikan ka sa cash receipts department. I-trace di mo dito, pabalik sa mailroom. Kaya dito man lagi ka ni mailroom, di ba, ang pre-list and remittance advice. Then, for example of entries, reconcile daily deposit to validated deposit ticket. So, entries meaning entry sa journal. For completeness, so for a sample of days, verify that all cash receipts are recorded by reconciling daily listings of cash receipts and validated deposit ticket to cash receipts journal. So again, it mentions here sample of, because we do sampling, di ba? When we do audit, we are not expected to audit everything, all transactions kay majigita na day. So, mamili lang ta og samples. So for example of days. Then, valuation or allocation for a sample of entries in cash receipts journal, examine remittance advice, and verify that discount taken was appropriate. So, for example, if gibutang dito ni customer, oy, I am paying invoice number 1. Invoice number 1 shows that I owe you 100,000, but I paid man within the discount period, so I am entitled to this discount. So, that's why dili 100,000 ang akong gibayad ninyo, but kanina lang reduced amount. So as auditors, we have to check whether the discount taken was really appropriate. So how do we do that? We look at the credit term. Di ba katong 2, 10, and 30. Kanang mga inana. So tanawon ninyo kung kanus nahitabo ang sale. Unya, i-compare ninyo kung kanus ni bayad si client. If that date, kung kanus siya ni bayad, falls within the credit period or discount period, then the discount was proper. If beyond na siya, so dili proper ang pag-minus niya sa discount. Then we also have to foot accounts receivable subsidiary ledger and reconcile to the general ledger account. So when we speak of foot, so kaya ng foot, i-add mo tanan. I-add mo pangitaon mo ang aggregate amount. And then, tanawa, kung ang total dito ng mga accounts receivable sa tanan customers equal sa amount sa accounts receivable nga naa sa ato ang general ledger. Presentation and disclosures or review account coding for a sample of entries in the cash receipts journal. Okay, so let's now examine the accounts that are involved in the audit of receivables and revenue. So these are the accounts that are normally affected when naay sales mahitabo ug naay collection mahitabo. Okay? So we have here the following transactions. So let's refresh our minds as to the debits and credits, because ako manggod personally, when I do audit, let's say when I solve an auditing problem, I look at it on a T account basis. Because if maghinumdum kog formula, basin ma-mix-mix na ko siya, imbis add, ma-minus na ko, imbis minus, ma-add na ko. At least for accounts receivable, it would all make sense to me because I know the rules of debit and credit. So let's look at that. So here, cash sales. Okay, wait. So sales is an income statement account, right? So for sales, wala tayo beginning balance ana because pag sugod sa period, zero out man siya, di ba? Kay temporary account raman si sales. So at the end of the last period, na zero out na siya. So at the beginning of the current period, wala siya beginning balance. Accounts receivable is a balance sheet account, so permanent account siya, therefore naa siya beginning balance. The beginning balance will be reflected on the normal side of normal balance of that particular account. So since accounts receivable is an asset, normal balance is debit, therefore beginning balance is on the debit side. So beginning balance. And then the ending balance will be on the separate opposite side. Cash is a balance sheet item, permanent account ni siya, so we have to place beginning balance and ending balance. So since this is an asset account, normal balance will be on the debit side. So beginning balance and ending balance on the opposite side of the account. Sales returns and allowances Income statement account ni siya, so temporary account which will be closed at the end of the period. So therefore, in the next period, wala siya beginning balance. Same goes with sales discounts. Allowance for bad debts, this is a balance sheet account. So this is a permanent account, this which means na siya beginning and ending balance. Allowance for bad debts, what is the normal balance of this? So since this is a contra asset, the normal balance will be on the credit side. So the beginning balance will be here. And then the ending balance will be on the separate or opposite side. Bad debts expense. Bad debts expense is an income statement account. So temporary account. Wala siya beginning balance. Okay, let's proceed. So cash sales. So all you need to do is to imagine a journal entry. So if we have sold something for cash, so that's debit cash, credit sales, right? So cash sales, so debit cash, credit sales. Okay, credit sales. Ang pasabot aning credit sales? Sales on account. So for sales on account, debit accounts receivable, credit sales, right? Collections from credit sales. So katong mga nakautang na to, nibayad na. So unsa man na? Debit, cash, credit, accounts receivable. Availment of sales discounts. Pagbayad niya, naka-avail siya sa discount. Naka-avail siya sa discount because nibayad siya within the discount period. Okay. So, debit cash, tapos credit accounts receivable, and then debit, balancing figure sa debit mo na ang sales discounts. Debit, sales discounts. Okay, so debit, sales discounts, and then credit accounts receivable. Write-off of accounts receivable. So these are for worthless accounts. Nga, sure nagyud ta, nga di nagyud ta makakollect despite earnest efforts to collect. So write-off, so tangtango na to siya from our accounts receivable. And it will also have the corresponding effect of decreasing the allowance for bad debts. So debit, allowance for bad debts, credit, accounts receivable. Return of goods from customers. So debit, sales returns and allowances. And then credit, accounts receivable. End of year adjustments for bad debts. Diba? At the end of the year, we have to make an adjusting journal entry to record the bad debts for the year. So that's debit bad debts expense and then credit allowance for bad debts. Recovery of accounts previously written off. So for example, we have written off something because we thought we cannot collect anymore from that customer, but then later on, the customer pays us. So that's actually a debit to cash and a credit to allowance for bad debts. Take note of this one because daghan man gud masayop ani. The recovery of accounts previously written off will not affect accounts receivable, but it will increase gibalik na to dito sa allowance for bad debts. Because remember here, we have written off the amount, but then we recovered it, so we add it back to the allowance account. Okay, so we have to remember that the account in order for us to solve the problems related to the audit of receivables and revenue. Okay, let's begin with problem number 1. So here we have this problem. ABC company had the following information relating to its accounts receivable for the year 2021. So let's look at first the question. ABC should report the December 31, 2021 accounts receivable before allowance for sales returns and uncollectible accounts at. So what the problem is asking us is to determine the correct balance of accounts receivable. So, kay accounts receivable man ang gipangita niya, kani nga ti account atong timan-an. Okay, so let's just replace these with the actual amounts. So accounts receivable, January 1, that is the beginning balance. So that's 12 million. Credit sales. Credit sales is a debit to it increases accounts receivable. That's actually a debit to accounts receivable. So this is 20 million. Collection from customers, excluding the recovery of accounts written off. Okay, collections from customers. O kani, collections from credit sales. Mano siya, 17 million. Accounts written off as worthless. So, write-off of uncollectible accounts. Then we have sales returns. So, it will decrease the balance of our accounts receivable. Right? Then estimated future sales returns, estimated uncollectible accounts. It says here before allowance. So, all right. So, the ending balance will be our balancing figure, right? So, sum it up. Okay, so 32. And here is 18,300,000. So, the balancing figure, that is end balance, mo siya ang gipangitaan nga problem. So, 32 minus 18,3. Okay, so the answer is 13,700,000. That is our ending balance. Oha. So, mo nang importante kaayo nga ka-imagine ta sa accounts receivable because it would be easier for us to determine the missing item if naarder sa the account. Okay, let's proceed to the next problem here. ABC company operates in an industry that has a high rate of bad debts. On December 31, 2021, before any year-end adjustments, the accounts receivable balance was 20 million and its allowance for doubtful accounts balance was 1,500,000. The year-end balance reported for the allowance for doubtful accounts is based on the following schedule. So we have here the number of days that this particular accounts receivable is outstanding, and then the percent uncollectible. The question is, what should be the doubtful accounts expense for the year ended December 31, 2021? Right. So if you notice, the amounts given here are more of the amounts that would affect the allowance for bad debts or allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so remember the T account for the allowance for bad debts or allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so here there is no beginning balance, but what was given to us is the balance before year-end adjustments. Okay, so if if ang gihatag kay balance before adjustment, we will treat that as our beginning, or we will replace it kaning beginning and ending, we shall replace them into its proper terminology, which is the unadjusted balance, and this one should be the adjusted balance. Right, so let's begin. The unadjusted balance at the end of the year is 1,500,000. And then the accounts which have been outstanding for more than 1 year and 100% uncollectible will be written off immediately. All right. So we have to compute first the following. So that's 10 million. Out of the 10 million, 5% will be uncollectible. Out of the 5 million, 10% will be uncollectible. Out of the 3 million, sorry, 3%, 30% rather, will be uncollectible. And for the 2 million, the entire 2 million will be uncollectible. Okay. So the total amount of this will be the adjusted balance, will serve as the adjusted balance of the allowance for bad debts. Okay, why? Remember in your financial accounting, di ba, you actually have uh, two bases. So, two bases. First, we have the accounts receivable as base. And second will be the sales as base. Base for the computation of our doubtful accounts. So since if your base is accounts receivable, remember that accounts receivable is a balance sheet item. So the corresponding output will also be a balance sheet item, which is allowance for bad debts. Which means that if you use accounts receivable as basis for computing this uncollectible chuchu, no? Ang imuhang makuha na is the ending balance of the allowance for bad debts. But if you use sales as base, since sales is an income statement account, your output is also income statement account, which is bad debts. So remember that one ha. So ang AR ganun inyong gigamit, ang inyong makompute ana, mauna siyang ending balance sa allowance for debt. Pero kung sales gani ang gigamit base, ang inyong makuha na nga amount is the bad debts expense, which is also an income statement item. Here, what is used is accounts receivable man. So, ang kani siyang ato ang nakuha diri, that should serve as the adjusted balance of the allowance for bad debts. And then it says here that the accounts that is that are outstanding for more than 1 year will be written off. So i-write off na to ang 2 million. So um, okay. I-write off ang 2 million. Okay. Wala man tayo recovery, so let's delete this. So what is missing is kani bad debts kaya ang gipangita man diri. What should be the doubtful accounts expense for the year ended December 31? So what we should do is to put debit and compare it to credit. So this one is 5.9. This one is 1.5, right? So the balancing figure, which is the bad debts expense, will be okay. I think there's something wrong. For a while. Matutog nagstorya taron no kay maka-point out mo. For a while. Yeah, this is 3.9 and then oh sorry. So 3.9 and it says that 2 million will be written off immediately. Sakto ba? Um, and then okay. So sakto na siya. Okay, so 39. Mhm. Okay, so the 3,900,000 is your ending balance. That's correct. That's correct. So dili na to sayo to kung akong gi-post diri ang 29 pod, because if ako siyang i-post, that means gikan siya diri, which is wrong, di ba? Kay gikan pa man siya sa 39, so madoble siya. Sakto. So sakto na ni siya. So 39 ang ending balance. So we have to put the debit and the credit and then compare it. Whatever is left is the balancing figure. So since the total debit is 39 and then the total credit is 1,500,000, the balancing figure is 2,400,000, and that represents our end of the year adjustment for bad debt. So the answer will be letter B. Let's proceed to the next problem. ABC company determined that the net realizable value of its accounts receivable at December 31 based on aging of the receivables was 15 million. Additional information is as follows. What should be ABC's uncollectible accounts expense, or otherwise termed as bad debts expense? So what is given here is the net realizable value. So unsa kay ng net realizable value? That is accounts receivable less allowance for doubtful accounts ending. Right? So we have here NRV. What is given is the NRV. So that's 15 million. And then it gives us the ending balance of the accounts receivable here, which is 17 million. Which means that our account allowance for doubtful accounts ending balance is 2 million. So knowing this, let's now use the allowance for doubtful accounts, the account. Right. So it says here, what should be ABC's uncollectible accounts expense? So kanay gihapon ang gipangita, right? Okay, so let's post the amounts that are available here. The allowance for uncollectible accounts at the start of the year, January 1, 2021, is 1,500,000. So it's here, 1,500,000. And then uncollectible accounts written off during 2021. So write off is here. Uncollectible accounts recovered, 200,000. So here. And the ending balance that we have computed a while ago, that is 2 million. Again, what is left or the balancing figure will be our bad debts expense. So let's foot the debit and compare it to credit. Okay, so what's the difference? 1,300,000. So the 1,300,000 difference balancing figure, that is the balance. That is the amount of our bad debts expense or uncollectible accounts expense for the year. Right. So last problem. All of ABC company sales are on a credit basis. The following information is available for 2021. ABC provides for doubtful accounts expense at the rate of 10% of net sales. At December 31, 2021, the allowance for doubtful accounts balance should be, okay, here, muna siya kung gingan ninyo, ang gihimo niya nga base for the doubtful accounts is sales. So, kay sales man niyang gigamit, ang amount nga ma-determine na to ana, that is the expense. Dili na siya mao ang ato ang allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so it says here that the doubtful accounts is expense at the rate of 10% of net sales. So net sales will be gross sales less sales returns less sales discounts, right? So that's net sales 10 times 10%. This will give us our doubtful accounts expense. Okay. Gross sales is 22 million. Then sales returns is 2 million. Sales discounts we don't have. Net sales will be 20 million, and then multiply it to 10%. So 2 million, this will be our doubtful accounts expense. But that's not the one nga gipangutana ni problem. Ang gipangutana ni problem is the ending balance of the allowance for doubtful accounts. So we have to look at the T account for the allowance for doubtful account or allowance for bad debts. Okay, so we have here the allowance for doubtful accounts beginning balance. So that's 1 million. End of year adjustments for bad debts, this one, 2 million. Then we have accounts written off as uncollectible, this one. And then we have recovery of accounts written off, it's 200,000. So what is asked is the ending balance, this one. So mao na siya ato ang balancing figure. So for credit side, that's a total of 3,200,000. For the debit side, that's 600,000. So ang difference niya is 2,600. Okay, so bravo. Letter B. 2,600 is our ending balance of the allowance for doubtful accounts or allowance for bad debts. Right, so I hope you learned something in this recorded discussion, and I'll see you all again for the discussion of the next topic. And so I meet po maybe this week or next week para i-discuss na to ang substantive procedures using sa katong mga documents nga ako ang gi-attach sa Canvas para masugdan na sa inyong audit firm ang audit sa cash and audit of accounts receivable. So I'll walk you through the process and then you do it on your own na after. Okay? Sige. So thank you so much, and I apologize for the belated uploading of this discussion because super busy kayo, and I thank you all for the patience that you have extended to me so far. Thank you and good day.